All right. YouTube, Instagram, we are good. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of the lead faculty for clinical management of the fitness, athlete, pregnancy, and postpartum. I am going to apologize for my tired eyes because I just got off a red eye from teaching pregnancy and postpartum athlete live in Bellingham, Washington. We had such a fun time teaching all things pregnancy, postpartum, female athleticism, and it was just such a blast. And Bellingham is beautiful. That in combination with watching so many moms who were crushing it in the semifinals. Cara Saunders singing happy birthday to her daughter in the Torian Pro. She turned 3. Annie Thor's daughter getting her ticket to the games. Ariel Lowen going to the last chance qualifier. There were just so many female athletes who are also moms who are crushing it this weekend. And so it was so fitting that we were talking about all things female athletes. We were watching these moms crush it on the CrossFit Games semifinal circuit, and it was just so great. If you are interested in joining in with CMFA Pregnancy Postpartum, we have some live courses coming up. June 18th, we are in Atlanta. And that is our next course. And then our next online cohort starts in July. Is it July? No, end of June. I'm sorry. My brain is not functioning. I'm on very little sleep because I don't know. If you can sleep on a plane, you need to teach me your secrets because I'm not very good at it. Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about sometimes the perception. Our course is called Fitness Athlete, Pregnancy and Postpartum. So inevitably, people think that we are only talking about topics and themes that are relevant to really competitive athletes. So that we're only talking about the elite of the elite, the Annie Thor's daughters and Cara Saunders, and that sometimes what we're talking about isn't relevant to other people. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about is that our definition of an athlete, a female athlete, is anyone who has any aspirations or goals to move their body intentionally. And so that can mean somebody who is doing a burn boot camp, that is somebody who is in the CrossFit space, that is somebody who is a runner, that is somebody who is a weekend warrior, that is somebody who gets to the gym 6 times a week. Any of those individuals are athletes. And as a faculty, we believe that momming requires fitness. And so all moms or to-be moms or people who hope to be moms are athletes in their own right. And so when we're thinking about some of the concepts and constructs that we are talking about, this is not just for the competitive elite level athlete. We are going to be able to scale up some of the demands of their sport and be able to meet them where they're at if we do have competitive athletes who are trying to get back to sport. But a lot of the things that we're talking about in terms of return to activity can include return to activities of daily living, the demands and weights and recommendation or requirements that are placed upon females when it comes to navigating through the motherhood journey. So that's first of all, what we consider an athlete is anybody who wants to move their body intentionally, and momming requires fitness. The second thing that sometimes people will say to us is we are really strong advocates that this 6-week wait, do absolutely nothing, and then listen to your body is really BS. Like we don't, in anything in our profession, we are starting to see that putting these absolute guidelines, putting this random line in the sand that you're not going to do anything for 6 weeks and then you're going to return to activity doesn't usually pan out that well because people's level of healing, people's previous level of function, the demands of what they need to do after 6 weeks is really different. And so we're starting to see preliminary literature that supports getting back to exercise early. And so sometimes people will say, well, there's just no way that unless you're an athlete that you're going to want to get back to exercise before 6 weeks. And when we are talking to a female athlete, as soon as they go through birth, they are a postpartum person just like any other person. And so sometimes they're going to have the motivation that they want to move because it makes their bodies feel good. They're also going to have we're just going to have just as many conversations giving permission to a person who feels like they need to be doing more in order for them to rest. So while the catchy stuff on social media is, you don't have to wait 6 weeks, we have just as many conversations saying that you're going to wait until you feel like your body is ready for movement. And when you are ready, whether that's at 3 weeks or 16 weeks or 18 months postpartum, as pelvic floor physical therapists, we are going to be there to guide you. We are going to be there to be that ally with you in order for us to be able to figure out a plan for you that is going to allow you to remove barriers to movement and allow you to do the things that you want to do. Part of the reason why we are such huge advocates for earlier return or gradual exposure to activity prior to 6 weeks has nothing to do actually with whether or not you're an athlete. It has everything to do with the fact that in our country, in the United States, you have 6 to 12 weeks to go back to work. And so if you are working as a physical therapist, for example, and you do absolutely nothing after birth, and then you go back to occupational lifting, right? We do a lot of work where we're lifting up people's limbs and arms and moving around. That can be a lot on a postpartum body. So even not even thinking about return to sport, sometimes that advocacy for at least beginning to have movement that is done in a very safe and gradual way is a consequence of the demands on a female's body with respect to the way that maternity leave is set up right now, where we don't have the luxury of having, longer amounts of time at home. We have to start thinking about return to work, unfortunately, relatively early. And so some of those things as well have nothing to do with whether you're an athlete or not, and just the demands of your life and the timelines to which you have to return to certain things. And so again, we're having these conversations that people think, oh, well, this couldn't possibly relate or be similar to some of my moms who are exercising for health, and that is not true, because we have so many other demands on the female body that are super important. And then the last thing is around when we think about birth, and people say, well, there was no way I could have gone back to exercise at 2 weeks because I had all this trauma and I had a lot that happened to me in my birth story. And that is something that we always are going to hold space for. That does not, like, again, that's not if you're an athlete or if you're not, that you're more likely to experience trauma if you're non-athletic versus athletic. There is no link to any of those things. And we know that what happens in your birth story and what happens within your obstetrical history can be these risk factors for pelvic floor dysfunction, and the emotional burden and the emotional toll of labor and delivery, especially when it doesn't go the way that we expected, if we don't feel like we were advocated for, if there was a lack of consent in different aspects of a person's birth story, we can really feel like we just can't physically show up for movement because we're processing so much emotionally. And again, that has nothing to do with whether you're an athlete or not. And that is going to completely make us think about what our timelines are going to be and how to best show up for those individuals so that they can process what they need to process. And then again, when exercise is something that they want to put on the table, we are there for them. Finally, some people think that athletes are going to be able to come back to exercise so much sooner than non-athletes. And while motivations might be slightly different for individuals who are, in that athletic space versus not, sometimes what I question is, are we instilling more fear that isn't being overcome by people whose motivations aren't as high to return to exercise? When we think about return to exercise, oftentimes when we are trying to push this narrative that graded exposure and doing things like reconnecting to core at 2 to 3 weeks postpartum, or starting to get into like a rehab program that early, a lot of people, their fear will come from a place of not wanting to have their organs fall out of their body, or not wanting to make things worse. And unfortunately, I place blame on the medical profession, our profession included, with why we have these athletes, these women, these moms, these people who are giving birth, that they are feeling this way postpartum. Some of that is based on kind of that check-in with themselves, but some of that is based on the way that we have communicated that postpartum space as providers, saying that, you're going to hurt yourself. I have heard pelvic PTs say, oh, well, if you're leaking and you're pushing it too hard, you're setting yourself up for problems down the road. And that is not helpful. That is creating fear. That is creating this pre-traumatic stress disorder. This is creating this thought virus that is having individuals who wouldn't maybe label themselves as an athlete feeling afraid to move. And we need to be starting to talk about where the guideposts are, how to know what your body is ready for and not ready for. Allow our people to have self-efficacy, but also recognize that their body is strong and resilient. Tissues heal. They're going to be able to return to things that they want to do, and we're going to empower them that they can do that. And so sometimes they think, oh, well, I'm not an athlete, I couldn't possibly do these things, and my provider told me that I could make things worse, and that I could give myself a persistent diastasis recti, or I will always have an ab separation, I can't do abs. Like, all of these messages are unfortunately perpetuated by some of us in the medical profession. And we tend to be very quick to kind of knee-jerk reaction and say that this is coming just from our medical colleagues, but that is not true. And it is coming from a variety of healthcare providers. And we really need to work on our communication and check our own biases with respect to where our recommendations are coming from, because the literature is becoming increasingly more clear that this 6-week not return to exercise, or this that lifting is going to cause more pelvic floor dysfunction, especially when done in a progressive way, where we remove those barriers, where we live in the land of the yellow light, where we are able to progress individuals appropriately. That risk starts to become quite low. And we know that for any medical intervention, we would never say, I wish that I was weaker in this moment. And what can happen is that for maybe our individuals who don't label themselves as athletes, that deconditioning can maybe be more significant. And so they believe that their body is different than an athlete's body, and that is not true. And our providers believe that the things that we are talking about within the realm of athleticism doesn't translate to all of our females that are giving birth and are trying to come back to their activities postpartum. And that is also not true. And so in general, whether we are working with an athletic population or not, we have to consider that, one, our idea of an athlete is anybody who is wanting to move their body intentionally, whether that is to show up for their kids and complete activities of daily living and momming, or individuals who want to get back to the CrossFit Games. When you are a person who is giving birth, whether you are an athlete or not, you are a postpartum person who is giving birth, and that does not change. The risk factors during labor, the pelvic floor dysfunctions that can potentially happen as a consequence of your obstetrical history, those things are exactly the same if you're considering yourself as an athlete or not. That early 6-week return to exercise is necessary for a lot of individuals who don't have the luxury of of being able to do a gradual return to their job, to their vocation. And so for athletes, their occupation might be their sport, but for many females, their occupation can be more active. And that return to sport guideline is that return to occupation guideline. And we need to be conceptualizing it that way too in our current landscape where, 6 weeks of unpaid maternity leave is sometimes all that individuals can get. And then finally, when we're thinking about what this return and this resiliency, we have to really look inward and check why our individuals who are not considering themselves as athletes believe that they can't do some of these things because they're not the athlete, or that somehow their circumstances are different. Is that coming from a place of personal beliefs and expectations? And did those personal beliefs and expectations come because that is the messaging that their medical providers, including PTs, have told them about their pregnant and postpartum journey, that they somehow lack resiliency, that they need to be careful, that they're going to set themselves up for their organs falling out of their body? And, I just, like I said, we tend to cast shade over on our OBs or our birth providers, and that's not fair because it's coming from other places too, including within our own profession. All right. Our course is called Fitness Athlete, but Fitness Athlete means anybody who wants to move their body. And I hope that you all can see some of the bridges that we're trying to really create when it comes to empowering resiliency in that pregnant and postpartum space, being mindful that there are changes in our physiology, there are risk factors with respect to the pelvic floor, but that we are the providers. That is our skilled care. That is our way of navigating the yellow light with respect to exercise. And we are going to create that allyship with our clients, and we're going to be able to help them do all of the things that they want to be able to do. Hopefully I made sense. I'm only on 2 hours on a plane, but it was so worth it because pregnancy and postpartum in Bellingham was amazing. I hope you all have a wonderful start to your week. If you're in Canada and you are listening, happy Victoria Day. I hope you have a really great long weekend. For our American listeners, hope you're getting ready for Murph, and we will talk to you all soon.